Hello, and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of human ingenuity, clever, inventive, and original thinking. My name is Ken Tencer, CEO of Spyder Works, a leading business consultancy for mid-market organizations and entrepreneurs globally. My guest for today is Jim Blasingame, one of the world's leading experts on small business and entrepreneurship. Jim has been the creator and award-winning host of the syndicated weekday radio program, The Small Business Advocate Show, which is run for almost 25 years, and he's conducted over 1,000 live interviews annually with his brain trust. The world's largest community of small business experts, policymakers, and entrepreneurs. Jim has been featured as a syndicated columnist for various newspapers, magazines, and online publications, including Forbes.com, BizJournals.com, NASDAQ.com, and Manta.com. Called the O. Henry of business book writers, Jim has authored 4, which have sold more than 300,000 copies, including his latest book, The Third Ingredient. As a champion of Main Street business, Jim has received numerous awards from a number of national organizations, such as the U.S. Small Business Administration, the American Chamber of Commerce Executives, and the Association of Small Business Development Centers. Talkers Magazine has recognized Jim as one of the most important radio talk show hosts in America. You can find all of Jim's podcasts at smallbusinessadvocate.com. As a longtime admirer of Jim's work and a nearly 10-year member of his brain trust, I wanted to bring him on to say hi to the future, because I believe he has a lot of important things to say about the past, present, and future of business that should really be highlighted as often as possible. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Good morning, Jim. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Ken, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. This is a real treat for me. I mean, you've been an on-air radio guru for decades now. I was on your show many times, and now the tables are turned. How does it feel not getting up at 4 in the morning?
Well, I did that for 23 and a half years, and I didn't realize how much sleep I was losing. and so I'm enjoying not getting up at 4:20 every morning, but I miss the conversations. By the time, for 23, almost 24 years, by the time most people got to work, I'd already had 4 high-level conversations with international thought leaders like you in their field on 4 different topics. And I mean, that was, before most people, by the times most people were eating breakfast. So I miss that. And that's the reason why I enjoy this kind of a conversation. And of course, you're in my conversations, all those dozens of calls we had together. You were gracious enough to spend time with me on the radio and share your knowledge and wisdom and expertise. All those times it was all without video. It was all, in fact, we went years without knowing what each other looked like.
That's true. Well, always great to have been on. And, you just touched on something that I think is so important for not just people in business, but people in life. You miss the conversations. There's a true passion in your voice when you speak to people, when you ask questions. I mean, I've had the opportunity to be interviewed hundreds of times, not just by you, but by others. And I always came away feeling that I just had a great conversation when I spoke with you. And that to me, that's a true art.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. There are a handful of reasons why I stopped doing my show, but I think I didn't appreciate how important it was for me to do it, to stop while I still loved it.
Well, that is
that may sound strange, but we've all seen people who stayed too long at the party, right? and I never ever felt like I was phoning in an interview, and I never want to do that. And as I said, there were 3 or 4 things kind of came together to make it a perfect storm or a perfect solution. And I remember thinking, you know what, this is the way to go. And not I would never want Ken to say, man, Blasingame is, he's not the same guy, whatever. So anyway, that's and as they say down here in the States, Ken, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, it's a good story. But so when you look back now, I mean, you've been a business leader, an author, you've been on air. What are some of the things you're most proud of when you think back over many years?
When I started my consulting company, I'm going to go way back. When I started my consulting company in '89, several years before I started my media company, I was helping individuals and CEOs, small business CEOs. But I developed a sales training course that was an amalgamation of all of my work with Sears and Xerox and the US Army and all that. I developed a sales training course and I sold it to individuals. I was just trying to get some revenue for my new company, right? So I put it out there, and I did several of these seminars over a couple of years where I'd have 30 or 40 or 50 people. And I actually made a workbook. I created a bound workbook that was, Xerox and Sears and the US Army a la Jim, so to speak. And I put it all together, and no copyright infringements. And I gave it to everybody, and I gave them a one-day workshop on how to become a salesperson, a commissioned salesperson, knocking on doors. Hi, I'm Jim. How do you like me so far?
Yeah,
And I was just one last thing. 4, 5, 6 years later, a guy who sold fences, came up to me, and I was in the mall, I think, walked up to me and he said, "Hey, Jim, I want you to know your course changed my career. And every day that I drive around selling fences, your workbook is sitting in the seat beside me."
Yeah, that's an amazing feeling, isn't it?
I'll go to my grave with that story. I'm a happy camper.
Yeah, Jim, I had that similar when my second book came out. I was on commuter train and the person beside me was reading it. And I just looked down and I was going, that's a seminal moment, and it's great to recognize and celebrate it.
Well, I've had people tell me, "Hey, Jim, I read your book," and I always say, "Oh, you're the one."
There you go. How about some of the things you'd take back? Anything you'd want a mulligan on in your career?
Well, I'm sure there are. I wish I had gotten started with the internet earlier than I did. I was late to the party, although my first website, I paid for my first website to be built in '97. So that's not exactly late.
Not too late.
I mean, I had a website going in '97 for my new media company, but I really was 2 or 3 years late. So in the late '80s, remember CompuServe?
Yep.
And what was the other one? There was another one like CompuServe that you could dial up to on your modem with your Hayes 800 baud modem, right?
Yes.
I wasn't smart enough to see in the '88, '89 what that was going to become. And I was getting my new company going, and for some reason I sort of dropped out of all that for 2 or 3 years. And I wish I had not done, I wish I had been, I mean, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe I wouldn't be happy right now. Who knows? But I felt like I was MIA from, say, '94 to '97. I was kind of MIA in there 3 years. And as you know, a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of people did some things,
Absolutely.
But then I might be one of these evil big tech billionaires, and I wouldn't like that.
Yeah, it would be tough to have the yachts, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons that I started this show and the whole platform, Say Hi to the Future. It's all about human ingenuity, is that I wanted people to have the opportunity to see and hear about the future, to see and hear about the latest things, even the latest dreams. And it's funny, and you've known me long enough that I went back. I'm doing my doctorate just for fun as I'm running my company. One of our
God
first
bless you.
one of our first classes is artificial versus human intelligence, and that robots and computers are going to take over the world. And I thought, well, it's not the movie Beyond the Planet of the Apes. We didn't just discover a new species. If we don't like these things, turn them off. We turned them on. So I said, let's celebrate human ingenuity, clever, inventive, original thinking.
But I remind people, Ken, that no algorithm ever wrote itself.
Absolutely. So on that, I mean, you've met and you've seen so many people and come across so many ideas. What are some of the truly brilliant ones that might have stuck with you that they might still be in the market today?
Well, you're right. I mean, it's hard to catalog all the things. I've spent a lot of time with futurists like yourself, Joel Barker, John Nesbitt. I've had John Nesbitt on my show a couple of 3 times. A number of other folks. In terms of, and you mean in terms of artificial intelligence?
No, just anything really. When I look at ingenuity and human ingenuity, it could be arts, it can be culture, it can be medicine. It's just thinking a little bit differently.
Yeah. I guess I would say the way we have sped up communication. How many times do you watch a period movie and the person is a mile away and they need to know that there's a boulder coming at them, and the
Right.
people back at the house know, and you're saying, just text them and tell them to get out of the way, right? Well, those are the kinds of things that we take for granted now. But I do think about, and I don't know if I'm helping you with your question or not, but I do think your innovation question is a good one, because I'm old enough to remember when we had none of this, when it was not very far away from that period movie.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a salesman and working a territory, and I had to stop at a payphone to make a call, but you have to think about, as we look at innovation, there's a song, I'm trying to remember the name of the song, Something's Lost, but Something's Gained. Joni Mitchell, I think.
Okay.
There's a song she wrote, I'm trying to remember the name of it, but she says, something's lost, but something's gained. We've gained a lot. And whatever we lose is on us. Does that make sense?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's, I'm the parent to 3 millennials. And the thing that I see is they are connected to the rest of the world in ways that we could never have imagined. They have virtually been to countries as well as traveling. They have virtually spoken to people. They can do it any time that they want with anyone in the world. And that connectivity, if it's used for a positive, to your point, I think it leaves us in great stead. And frankly, I'm pretty hopeful for the future.
Well, I hear everything you're saying, and I don't disagree with you. But the caveat is what I said a minute ago. What do we remember the story about the dog who chased the car and caught it and then said, now what do I do with it?
Yes.
What are you going to do with this? And so the only thing that bothers me, and if I devolve into a hello boomer moment here, it's going to be this. Don't disregard what came before, because what came before was real. It wasn't virtual. It wasn't instantaneous. What came before was real. Analog is real. Digital is not real. It appears to be real, and you can do something with it, but it's not real. If you understand the context of,
Yep.
of what I'm saying, I know you do, and so I worry a little bit that the younger folks disregard the shoulders they stand on, and because it's irrelevant to them. And I get that it's irrelevant. You know, there's only so much bandwidth, right? You and all of us have only so much bandwidth. But I'll give you a real quick story. I was talking to a bunch of young people one time, all in their 20s and 30s. They'd all been to town. Some of them were married. They were in relationships. They were not children. And we were talking about things like this, and I thought to ask them this question. I said, "Do you watch period movies?" And they said, "No, I don't watch those old movies." I mean, to the person, no, I don't watch those movies. Those are those old grainy movies. I said, no, I don't mean the old 1929 movies. I don't watch those either. But I said, what about a new movie made about a period 100 years ago? It's beautiful cinematography, everything's great, but it's 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And to the person, instantaneously, they said, no, I don't watch those movies. Now, I can see where they won't watch them because it irritates them that nobody could text that guy and tell him the boulder was coming at him. And so that's irrelevant to them. But what I worry about, and again, this is my okay boomer moment, I don't think I hope we never get to the point where knowing how that part of that kind of raw humanity doesn't influence the digital. Does that make sense?
It really does. And I mean, you know, we've talked about these things over the past decade. In my first book, 90% Rule, the 90% is the foundation, what came before.
Which I helped you launch, by the way.
Absolutely, you did. But you know, it's all about respecting the past. And what I say, whether it's to my kids, if I'm teaching or if I'm working with a company, you don't have to relive the past, but you have to understand and respect it. Because companies got here for a reason, institutions got here for a reason. Let's understand the good and bad and build on it or not. But yes, and a very healthy respect for our past. And I haven't done it for movies, but I've taken my son to see Van Halen and Aerosmith and a few bands that just so he understood.
They like our music. They like our music. But you know, one of the things that I remind people about, Ken, is it took us 10,000 years to go from mammoth to mainframe.
Right.
We've gone from mainframe to mobile in 30 years. We went from mainframe to mobile in 30 years. 10,000 to 30. So the jury, as cool and sexy as all this stuff is, which as you know, you and I mean, look what we're doing now. I mean, whatever I've accomplished in the last 30 years could not have happened without digital. I'm a major user of digital leverage. You are too. Yeah. I believe in it. I teach it. I encourage it. But to not hold it in perspective, in my opinion, that 10,000 years versus 30 years, to not hold that in perspective is where the danger is, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. And, you know, Jim, with that, it's probably a great segue moment to your latest book, the third ingredient. And we haven't had a chance to talk about it. So I'd love to dig into that a bit more. Just for the listeners, the third ingredient, the journey of analog ethics into the world of digital fear and greed. It does not sound like a romance novel.
Although there's some romance in there.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the book and analog ethics.
I started thinking about this book in, a dozen years ago. In fact, I went back and found my first notes on this book, 2008. And I titled it. In fact, I titled it The Third Ingredient in 2008. And the subtitle came later. But I started noticing that the way people were behaving was different. The way people were behaving online with their digital leverage was different than the way they would have behaved in face to face. You and I are a couple thousand miles apart.
Yep.
I could say something now or do something now, and you can't get to me. So I'm insulated, right? But in the analog world, we would have done this face to face. We would have met in Chicago, and we'd have done this face to face, and I would have behaved in a way that would have been such that I would have cared what you thought when we were that close.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have done anything physical or verbally to have, whatever I did physically or verbally would have impacted our relationship and at that moment. So I started thinking about those things, and I was noticing, see, I was worried about social media. I declared myself the social media heretic in 2008. And, a heretic is a true believer who is not happy with the status quo.
Right.
And so I started warning people about Facebook, for example, and Twitter. I started warning people about this in 2008. Again, I'm no Luddite, but I am a boomer, but still I could see that this had the chance to get out of hand. And other things that I saw how big corporate, big tech, some of the things that they were doing. These were algorithms that were being written by people who didn't have the ethical grounding that you and I do, which is not to say that they're not good people. That's not about that. It's about the grounding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they came up, whose knee they sat at. These are people who are writing these these algorithms that were leveraging things without regard to the analog, the human part of this.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I started thinking about, in fact, I didn't realize it, but apparently I coined the term analog ethics. I may be just the only first person to put it together. Maybe coining it is too strict of a term, but I was on a call with a futurist one time, and I mentioned this to him years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. I used the term analog ethics. He looked it up on Google. He said, "Do you realize no one's ever used that term before?" I said, "No."
Yeah, it's a brilliant term.
It's because there really isn't analog ethics. Before digital, there wasn't analog ethics. It was just ethics.
Yes. Well, and I think that's a great point. I think, as you're saying, when you're face to face with people, and you see and you can hear, you can feel the impact of your words, I think that pushes us to be more ethical. And I think that, one of the big topics today is coming out of the pandemic. Are we going to be distance? Are we going to be hybrid? And I always believe that we'll be hybrid or go more back to in person. I think we need it. I think we feed off of it. I think we need the serendipity of running into people in the office. And I think it's just important to us as human beings, because you're right. It's funny. I was looking at a few posts from my first shows a few weeks ago, and people anonymously go online and say not so nice things. I don't think that's a good place for humanity to go.
Well, I agree with you. And I loved your example of serendipity. You've worked in corporate America before. You've walked down the hall, and somebody would come toward you down the hall that you're on a project with or something, mm-hmm. and you without breaking stride, you say something to each other that serendipity. Wow. Yeah. And one of my best stories is when I was writing my third book, the Age of the Customer. I was stuck in the book, and there's a page in that book that happened. I was invited to an offsite by one of my sponsor/clients, mm-hmm. to their marketing sales team, and I was there for them for 4 days. And one morning, something hit me about what they said about their own company. Something hit me, and I quickly wrote some things down. And over the lunch break, I made some more notes, and I asked my host if I could show that to the group, and I did. Well, would we be fogies for saying that in the digital remote scenarios, there's less opportunity for serendipity? Would that be too strong to say? Would that be too presumptuous? I think it may be, but I think it's worth contemplating. What do you think?
Oh, I do. And I don't think it is too much to say. I mean, I've been running obviously all my sessions virtually for the last year. And one of the things that I do is at the end, I do it for my office. I'm usually the only one in X thousand feet, but I still have my whiteboards. And my whiteboards are low tech. They cost me a few $100s. Put all the ideas up there, put all the sticky notes. And I just say to anybody that I work with that, internally or customers, this is where everything begins and ends. And to be able to stand in front of these low tech boards and have a conversation, physically move things around, it's not something that's happening in the digital world. And I think it's a tremendous loss of opportunity.
And there's a difference. I think we should differentiate between conversations and product. You and I've had dozens of conversations over the years where we were sharing ideas, but we weren't really trying to build anything.
Mm-hmm.
You and I weren't trying to, I was helping you launch your book, or a conversation we had might have clarified some things for you, or it might have clarified, I'm sure I wrote articles after our conversations. You inspired me to write some articles, but our purpose wasn't a product. If we get back to the corporate, to the business side, your example of remote or face-to-face, I really think that's an important thing. And so if you don't mind me introducing this idea, one of the things that I started worrying about a little over a year ago, when we started, after we locked down for a little bit, some CEOs on my show came onto my show, corporate global CEOs. Mm-hmm. And I said, how's it going? They said, well, I'm shocked at how well things are going. I'm surprised at how well my people are performing. And I remember one guy said, tell me again why I'm paying $5 million in rent. However, over the next few months, I started asking them about culture. So what I realized in talking to these people was these companies were successful because they had a good corporate culture. When the lockdowns happened, their people left the hive and went and took the culture home with them. And they were able to work together just like they always had. But what about the new people who've never been to the hive?
Mm-hmm.
Now, where's the serendipity come? How many mentors did you have who didn't know they were your mentor? I had a lot of my mentors that I still quote never knew that they were being my mentor.
Yeah.
And that's where that serendipity comes in.
Yeah.
And I worry, if there's one thing I worry about almost more than anything in this pandemic that we've lost, because there are some silver linings and we've discovered some things. But one of the things that I'm afraid is going to be lost is the culture and placing a high, paramount, immutable value on culture.
Yeah. And you know what, this is where hopefully karma kicks in. I see this in a lot of ways. Early in the discussion between, fully digital stores or bricks and mortar, I had somebody from a major newspaper in the US call me up, and he really wanted me to say bricks and mortar are going away. And I said, absolutely not, ridiculous. Human beings have a need we're tactile, to touch, to feel, and then emotional, to see people and whatnot. I said, digital retail, it's going to boom. I'm not saying it's not. That would be ridiculous. And in hindsight, it would have been ridiculous. But look at how many digital retailers have gone to bricks and mortar. because even the culture between strangers, because of the, what we feel or believe about the brand, about the shopping experience, about being out and about in our neighborhoods, absolutely critical. And we couldn't lose it in terms of community. And we certainly, to me, can't lose it in terms of business and business culture.
You just defined analog. That was a beautiful definition of analog. And if Amazon had all the answers, if Amazon's model were perfect, they wouldn't have bought Whole Foods,
right?
And they wouldn't be putting in Amazon stores. And however, there is peril out there. There is pressure. There are threats to the face-to-face folks. God bless, God love them, everyone. There are the pandemic really, the best research I can use to put this in perspective. Last year, IBM did some research and they determined that the digital transformation process was accelerated by 5 years because of the pandemic. In other words,
yeah.
And see, that didn't mean anything to Google or Apple or Amazon. It doesn't mean anything to those guys. What that means is, okay, we're going to go from plan B to plan D overnight. That's all that means. They already had it in the hopper. But it hurts the little guys because small businesses needed that 5 years because we don't have the capital to flip a switch. We can't keep parallel universes running, and at the same time, and then flip over to the one that works. We don't have that capital. We don't have the human bandwidth, and we needed that 5 years for those who were lagging, who were behind. We needed that 5 years for them to catch up, for them to get their attention. And so if we look back on part of the wages of the pandemic shutdown, it'll be that a lot of companies that didn't do anything wrong except not be as big as they could have been and maybe a little behind the curve,
right?
Don't make it, aren't here in 5 years. But I agree with you. There will still be small businesses out there. Will still be brick and mortar because we're analog humans, and our children are, and our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren will be.
Yeah. So Jim, I think that leads to a wonderful last question, and I'll put you on the spot as a futurist now. You've been the small business advocate for America and many parts of the world for decades now. What is the future of small business? I mean, my whole life, 27 out of 35 years, has been as an entrepreneur. Will I exist in 20 years?
Yeah. Well, there's no question about it. I think I'm betting on humanity. Like as I said earlier, and I, at the risk of sounding like a Luddite or a boomer, digital is not real. It's handy, it's sexy, it's productive, it's fast, it's cool, it's made me money. It makes you money. It allows us to do this. I love it, but it's not real. If you see my meaning.
Yes, I do.
I said this earlier, analog is real. The mountains are real. The rivers are real. Human connection is real. Culture is real. All of that is analog. And I believe one of the reasons why I think that question bears asking now is what I said earlier about 10,030. We went from Mammoth to mainstream, and then to mainframe, and mainframe to mobile. I believe that we are a generation, and when I say generation, I mean everyone alive right now. We are in a epochal generation of humans who are having to make a transition that no other generations have ever had to make. There's no way we can have the answers. Perhaps not even in our lifetime, Ken, certainly not in mine. I'm older than you are. In my lifetime, I do not expect humanity to have this sorted out. But I think by sometime in this century, we will find a way to say, okay, this is digital, this is helpful, this is digital, this is not helpful.
Right.
And if you may have heard me talk about the schools, old school, new school, and the school. Old school is whatever you and I learned that's no longer relevant, right? New school is the stuff that we are not positive if it's ever going to be relevant, but right now it's pretty sexy. And then
Right.
there's the what I call the school, and that's the stuff that doesn't change. Cash flow is king is the school. You have to make a profit if you're going to survive long term is the school. Humans are always going to seek the humanity of others is the school. And somewhere down the road, all of this digital will get sorted out, and we'll have a good balance. I just hope that other influences, like I am worried about big tech. I don't mind telling you, I'm worried about big tech. I think big tech could potentially be a problem. I hope humans will say, okay, we like this stuff, we don't like that stuff, and I'm doing it. I don't know about you, but I'm doing it. I'm making choices that allow me to say that and not be a hypocrite and still live as in the digital world. Anyway, I don't know if I'm helping or not. I'm hopeful because I think there's too much analog human critical mass. Intrinsic, it's deep in us. And until a baby's born with a USB in its ear, I think that'll be the case.
Thank you so much, Jim, for joining me today. It's been a pleasure, and it's really a treat after so many years being on your show to speak with you.
Well, Ken, you're one of my favorites of all. I've got thousands of Brain Trust members, and you're clearly one of my favorites. And you know that because I invited you back so many times.
Absolutely.
But I love our work together. I'm so proud of what you're doing, and please, I'd love to do this again. If I get invited back, I would love to come back and talk about whatever you want. And anyway, I'm just proud of what you're doing. Good job.
Thank you so much.